We begin now Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Brachos. This is Berachos Daf 13b. The Gemara just concluded with Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Eliezer said that when it comes to the recitation of Kriya Shema, you only need to have kavana until the words Al Levavecha. And then the Gemara at the bottom of the page brought Rabbi Akiva, who now continues as follows: Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha Mikan Ata Lomed Shekol HaParsha Kula Tzricha Kavana. So Rabbi Akiva says that you have to say these words upon your heart. That teaches us that the entire parsha, this entire parsha, needs to be said with kavana. So Rabbi Akiva is more strict than Rabbi Eliezer and says the whole parsha needs to be said with kavana. Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Barchana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Akiva. This is the halacha like Rabbi Akiva. There are some people who learn this on the following brisa. The Tanya we learned in a brisa hakore es Shema, somebody who reads Shema, tzarich sheyechav in its libo, he needs to have kavana. Rabbi Acha mishum Rabbi Yehuda Omer kevon shekiven libo beperek rishon. As long as somebody has kavana on the first perek, the first perek of Shema, that first Shema through v'yahavta shuvein tzarich, he no longer needs to have kavana. Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Barchana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Acha she'amar mishum Rabbi Yehuda. This is the halacha like Rabbi Acha, who says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda that you only need to have kavana in the perek rishon. Tanya idach, we have another brisa, v'hayu shelo yikari l'mafreya. So it says, v'hayu teaches us you shouldn't read it out of order, you shouldn't read it backwards. Al levavecha. Rav Zutra Omer ad kan mitzvahs kavana. Again, Rav Zutra here says that only until al levavecha does a person need to have kavana. Mikan v'elach mitzvahs kriya. From here onward, it's only a mitzvah to read. We'll see what that means exactly. Rabbi Yoshia Omer, Rabbi Yoshia says, ad kan mitzvahs kriya, until al levavecha is the mitzvah to read. Mikan v'elach mitzvahs kavana. And from there on is a mitzvah to have kavana. So the Gemara now asks, Ma'ishna mikan va'elach mitzvahs kriya. Why is it that from there onward there is a mitzvah of kriya? Going back in Reb Zutra, that the mitzvah of kriya goes from then on. Dichsiv ledaber bam. What does it say in the second parsha of Shema and V'hoya? It says ledaber bam. You have to say, you have to read it. Hachanami yaksiv v'dibarta bam. Doesn't it say in the first parsha also v'dibarta bam? Certainly, Reb Zutra should agree that there's a mitzvah of kriya in the first parsha, just like the second. So the Gemara answers, Hachi kamar. This is what Reb Zutra was saying. Ad kan mitzvahs kavana ukriya. For the first parsha of Shema, the parsha through v'yahavta, you have to have kavana and you read it. Mikan v'elach kriya below kavana. But from v'haya onward, you can read it without kavana. So that's actually what Reb Zutra meant. He meant that there's no longer a need for kavana in the second parsha. Umayshna ad kan mitzvahs kavana ukriya dechsiv al levavecha v'dibarta bam hasam nami yaksiv al levavchem ledaber bam. The language in the second parsha also says al levavchem ledaber bam, very similar to al levavecha v'dibarta bam. So it would seem you should have to have kavana in the second parsha as well. Why does Rav Zutra say you don't need kavana in the second parsha? Gemara answers, Hahumi boy leilechid Rabbi Yitzchak. He uses those psukim in the second parsha for Rabbi Yitzchak's halacha. The Amar who says v'samtem es devarai eila, that you place these words tzricha shetehei sima keneged halev. This is referring to the placement of the tefillin, telling you that the tefillin shel yad needs to be placed across from the heart. And so therefore he doesn't have that pasuk available to tell us a requirement to have kavana in the second parsha of Shema. Now the Gemara moves on to what was Rabbi Yoshia saying. Amar Mar, the master said, the Brisa said before, Rabbi Yoshia Omer, Rabbi Yoshia says, ad kan mitzvahs kriya. The first parsha is a mitzvah of reading. Mikan va'elach mitzvahs kavana. Second parsha onward, only a mitzvah of kavana. So first, Ma'ishna mikan va'elach mitzvahs kavana mishum dechsiv al levavchem. Hachanami yaksiv al levavecha. Just like the second parsha says al levavchem, the first parsha says al levavecha, there should certainly be a mitzvah of kavana. So the Gemara explains, Hachi kamar, this is what Rabbi Yoshi was saying. Ad kan mitzvahs kriya v'kavana. In the first parsha there's a mitzvah of kriya and kavana. Mikan va'elach kavana below kriya. The difference between him and Rav Zutra was that from the second parsha, from then on, after the first parsha, you only have to have kavana. You don't even need to actually do the reading. Umayshna ad kan mitzvahs kriya v'kavana dechsiv al levavecha v'dibarta bam hasam nami haksiv al levavchem ledaber bam. Similar question to before. The same words are used in the first parsha and the second parsha. Just like in the first parsha it says al levavecha v'dibarta bam, and there's a mitzvah of reading and there's a mitzvah of kavana. The same basic words al levavchem ledaber bam is used in the second parsha. So why is there not a mitzvah of reading along with the mitzvah of kavana? So the Gemara answers similar to as before, Ahu b'divrei Torah ksiv. that pasuk of Al Levavchem Ladaber Bam, it cannot be used to teach us that you have to read and have kavana, because it's teaching us a halacha in reference to divrei Torah. V'achi kamar achmana. Here's what the Torah is telling you: Agmiru b'naichu Torah ki hechi deligresu behu. Person should teach you should teach your son's Torah to the point where they know it basically by heart. So therefore, Ladaber Bam, or Al Levavchem Ladaber Bam, is being used for that. So it cannot be used to tell us that you need to have both a mitzvah of kriya and kavana, and rather there is only a mitzvah of kavana in the second parsha. Gemara continues now with the brayso at the two dots. Tanu Rabbanu, we learned in a brayso, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Ad Kan Tzricha Kavanas Halev Divrei Meir. Meir says you only need to have kavana in the first pasuk. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Amar Rav, Rav says halacha Rabbi Meir. The halacha is like Rabbi Meir. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Sumchas Omer, Sumchas says, Kol Amarich Be'echad Ma'arichin Lo Yamav Ushnosav. Anybody who lengthens his pronunciation of the word Echad, he will have long days and long years. Amar Ravacha Bar Yaakov, Ravacha Bar Yaakov says, Uvedalid. This is particularly true with regard to the letter Dalid in the word Echad. Amar Ravashi, Ravashi says, Uvilvad shelo yachtov beches, just be sure not to cut off the pronunciation of the letter ches in your zeal to pronounce the letter Dalid, and to lengthen it, you might shorten your pronunciation of the letter ches. Do not do that. Rav Yirmiyah have a Yosef Kame to Rav Chia bar Abba. Rav Yirmiyah was sitting in front of Rav Chia bar Abba, Chazi dehave marich tuva. He saw that he was being very lengthy in his pronunciation of the word Echad. Amar le, he said to him, Kevan dam lichte lemalo lamato l'arba ruchos hashamayim. Once you've made HaKadosh Baruch Hu king above and below, and the four corners of the earth, the four directions, su lo tzricht, you don't need any more to lengthen the word Echad. Two dots. Amar Rav Nasan bar Marukva, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Nasan, the son of Marukva, says in the name of Rav Yehuda, Al levavecha bo amida. Al levavecha should be said standing up. The Gemara says, Al levavecha sal kadaitach. You think you should stand up just for two words? Elo'ema, rather say, Ad al levavecha bo amida. Until the words Al levavecha, you should stand up. Mikan va'elach lo, from then on, you don't need to stand up. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol parsha kula b'amida. The whole first parsha should be said standing up. V'az Rabbi Yochanan the time, Rabbi Yochanan follows according to his opinion. The Amar Rabba bar Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabba bar Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Ravacha Shamar Misham Rabbi Yehuda, that the halacha is like Ravacha in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, that the first parsha requires kavana. The idea basically is that for the parts of Shema that require kavana, a person should stand up for those portions. Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Zu Kriya Shema Shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The first pasuk of Shema Yisrael, that was the Kriya Shema of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Amar le Rav le Reb Chia. Rav said to Reb Chia, Lo chazino le Rebbe the mekabel ale ol malchus shamayim. I did not notice Rebbe being mekabel ol malchus shamayim. Rebbe, this is the same Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. What was happening over here was Rav and Rabbi Chia, they were sitting in a shir of Rebbe, of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and the time for Kriya Shema came during the shir, and Rav was telling Rabbi Chia, I didn't notice that Rebbe stopped. I did not notice him stopping to say Kriya Shema. Amar le said to Bar Pachti b'shah shemavir yadav al ponav mekabel olav ol malchus shamayim. So Rabbi Chia responded to Rav and he said, no, you should know that at the time that Rebbe put his hands over his face for one moment, a brief moment during the shir, that's when he was being mekabel ol malchus shamayim. That's when he was saying Shema. So now the Gemara asks, Choser v'gomra o eno choser v'gomra? Did Rebbe later on say the entire Shema and finish it, or did he not? Was it sufficient just to say that pasuk at that moment? Bar Kapara Omer eno choser v'gomra. Bar Kapara said he did not go back and say it. Rabbi Shimon Rebbe Omer choser v'gomra. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, said that he did finish it. Amar le Bar Kapara Rabbi Shimon Rebbe. Bar Kapara said to Rabbi Shimon as follows: Bishlam l'didi. It's good according to my opinion. Da amina eno choser v'gomra, that I say he didn't go back and say it again. Hainu demahad de Rebbe ashmaita dispa yitzias Mitzrayim. That's why Rebbe was always careful right after the time of Shema, and he said Shema, he would then talk a little bit about Yetzias Mitzrayim, because since he wasn't saying Shema again, he wanted to at least talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim so that he would be mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim. But according to you who says that Rebbe would later say the entire Shema anyway, why would he need to be careful to give a shir regarding Yetzias Mitzrayim if he's going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim later anyway, when he he says the entire Shema. And the Gemara answers simply, Kedei lahazkir Yetzias Mitzrayim bizmano. No, even according to that opinion, there was a purpose in saying a shir on Yetzias Mitzrayim, because he wanted to say, he wanted to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim in the time of Shema, in the proper time. But he would go back and say the entire Shema later, when it was not the time of Shema. Amar Rabbi Ela Brei de Rav Shmuel bar Marasa Mishmei de Rav. Rabbi Ela, the son of Rav Shmuel bar Marasa, says in the name of Rav, Amar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'nenas B'Sheina Yotza. If a person says the first pasuk of Shema through the word Echad and then he ends up falling asleep, he is Yotze. Amar Le Rav Nachman L'Daru Avdei. Rav Nachman said to Daru, his servant, B'Psuka Kama, for the first pasuk, Tziaron. You should pester me. You should make sure that I have proper kavana, and I say it Tefei Lo Tzaron, but don't do any more for any more parts of Shema. Do not bother me, trouble me to make sure that I say it. That is the main mitzvah. Amar Le Rav Yosef Rav Yosef Berei. Rav Yosef said to Rav Yosef said to Rav Yosef Brei de Rabba. Rav Yosef said to Rav Yosef, the son of Rabba, what did your father Rabba do? What was his practice? Amar Lei said to him, Psuka kama have kamitzar nafshe tvei lo have mitzar nafshe. He'd be very careful about the first pasuk, but he was not careful about the subsequent psukim, similar to the psak we just had. Amar Rav Yosef says, Pirkadon lo yikra Kriya Shema. Pirkadon, according to the standard opinion, is a person should not recite Kriya Shema while lying on his back. Some people have it that it means that while lying on one's stomach. But a person should not recite Kriya Shema Pirkadon. So the Gemara says, Mikrahu de lo likri. Sounds like he's saying a person should not read Kriya Shema when he's in that position. Hamigna shaper dami, but it sounds like there's no problem lying in that position. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi layet aman degoni apirkid. Didn't Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi curse somebody who lay on his back? Even just lying in that position is a problem, regardless of whether you're saying Kriya Shema or not. Amri, so they answer, Migna ki mitzli shaper dami. When a person is lying down, as long as he leans a little to the side, it's no problem at all. Mikra, but if he's reading Kriya Shema, afagav de mitzli, even if the person's leaning a little, nami aser, it is also forbidden, it is also problematic. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Yochanan matzli v'kari, is that really true? Rabbi Yochanan used to lean and read Kriya Shema, so apparently it's not a problem. And the Gemara answers, Shani Rabbi Yochanan is different. The Baal Basar Hava, he was a person with a lot of flesh. He was a larger person, so it was not problematic for him to do that. Continuing now the Gemara at the two dots near the bottom of the page, Uva Prokem Shoel. The Gemara says, Meishiv Machmas Mai, according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So it's not 100% clear in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said he is Shoel Mivnei HaKavod, but it doesn't say what he's Meishiv. It says he can ask someone, initially say Shalom Aleichem to somebody who he honors, but what about Meishiv? When you're between sections, who are you allowed to respond to? Ilema Mipnei HaKavod. Now, if you're going to say that a person's also responding to somebody who he honors, so Hashta Mishal Shoel Adurim Yeboy, it's obvious. If a person is allowed to initiate the conversation at that point in time with somebody who he honors, certainly he can respond to them. It doesn't even need to be said. So rather, the Gemara says, maybe what Rabbi Meir means is Ella rather, Shoel Mivnei HaKavod Umeshav Shalom L'chol Adam. Maybe between sections, Rabbi Meir is saying that a person can initiate, a person can ask Shalom Aleichem to somebody who he honors, and he can respond Shalom Aleichem to anybody. Now, Ema Seifa, let's look at the end of the Mishnah, at the end of Rabbi Meir's words. It says, Uva Ems, in the middle of a section, Shoel Mipnei Hayira Umeshiv. He can ask, he can initiate somebody who he fears, a conversation with somebody who he fears, but he can, and then it says he can respond, but again, it doesn't say who he's responding to. Meshiv Machmas Mai, who is he responding to? Ilema Mipnei Hayira, if again we're talking about somebody who he fears, Hashta Mishal Shal, if he can initiate, if he can ask Shalom Aleichem to somebody who he fears, Adurim Ibai, it's obvious that he can respond to somebody who he fears. Ella Mipnei HaKavod. Rather, it must be that it's one step lower. He's allowed to respond even to somebody who he only honors, not to somebody who he fears. But the problem is, Hainu de Rabbi Yehuda, if you're going to answer in this fashion, you've now made Rabbi Meir exactly the same as Rabbi Yehuda. Tetnan, because the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Be'emtza, in the middle of a section, Shoel mipnei hayira, he can ask out of fear, Umeshiv mipnei hakavod, and he can respond out of honor. Uveprakim, in between sections, Shoel mipnei hakavod, he can ask out of honor, Umeshiv shalom l'chol adam, and he can respond to anybody, which is exactly what you just said, Rabbi Meir said. So the Gemara says you're correct. You should discard the answer we gave for Rabbi Meir before, and the Gemara is going to give a new answer. There are words missing in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah should read as follows. Starting with Rabbi Meir. Beparakim shoel mipnei hakavod. If you're between sections, you can ask from somebody who you honor. Ve'ein tzarich lomar shu meishav. And obviously you can respond. When you put in the words ve'ein tzarich lomar, so then the Mishnah is acknowledging that this is obvious and it's no longer a problem. Uve'emtza shoel mipnei hayir. In the middle of a section, you can ask out of fear. Ve'ein tzarich lomar shu meishav. And obviously you can answer out of fear. Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. So according to this, Rabbi Meir is saying that between sections, it all goes by honor. You can ask and respond to somebody who you honor. And in the middle of a section, it all goes by fear. You can ask and answer to somebody who you fear. And by putting in the words ve'ein tzarich lomar, we have no problem in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, ba'emtza shoel mipnei hayira u'meishiv mipnei hakavod. In the middle of a section, you can ask because of yira and answer because of kavod. And the Gemara will continue on the next daf to continue with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the Mishnah. This concludes Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Daf 13b in Meseches Brachos.